There is one behavior that has ended more relationships, collapsed more partnerships, and caused more quiet devastation than almost any other form of betrayal known to human social life. It is not lying, it is not cheating, it is not even the dramatic, visible kind of betrayal that people can point to and name clearly. It is something far more subtle, far more common, and far more dangerous because it hides inside behavior that looks completely normal, even virtuous, right up until the moment the damage becomes impossible to ignore. Millions of people are experiencing this betrayal right now, inside their closest relationships, and they have no idea it is happening. By the end of this video, that changes. The behavior will be named, dissected, and illustrated with real examples that will make it immediately recognizable in any relationship. And the final section reveals something about this particular betrayal that psychology has documented extensively, but that almost never makes it into everyday conversation. Something that reframes not just how this behavior is recognized, but how deeply it needs to be taken seriously. Stay through the end, because the last part of this video is the part that matters most. There is a reason certain betrayals cut deeper than others. Obvious betrayals, the ones that are sudden, visible, and undeniable, are painful, but they are also clean. They leave a clear wound. The person can point to the moment, identify what happened, grieve it, and eventually move forward with a clear understanding of what occurred and why. The recovery, while difficult, follows a recognizable path because the injury is recognizable. But there is another category of betrayal entirely, one that does not arrive in a single moment, one that does not leave a clean wound, one that happens gradually, incrementally, in ways that are individually small enough to dismiss but cumulatively devastating. This category of betrayal is the one that most people spend years inside before they even realize it is happening. And by the time they realize it, the cost has already been paid, in trust, in energy, in opportunities missed, in relationships damaged, in a slowly eroded sense of their own judgment. The one behavior at the center of this video belongs to this second category, and it is this: the person who smiles to someone's face and speaks differently behind their back. Not gossip in the casual, harmless sense, not the natural venting that every human being engages in occasionally when they are frustrated or overwhelmed, but a deliberate, consistent pattern of presenting one version of themselves and their feelings to someone directly and an entirely different version to everyone else. A pattern of warmth in person and coldness in private, enthusiasm expressed directly, and skepticism expressed to others. Loyalty declared openly and disloyalty practiced quietly. This is the oldest betrayal sign in human social history, and nobody talks about it with the seriousness it deserves. To understand why this behavior is so damaging, it is necessary to understand what it actually does to the person on the receiving end, not just emotionally but psychologically and practically. When someone presents one version of themselves to a person directly, and another version to the world around them, they create a distorted information environment. The person being betrayed is making decisions about the relationship, about trust, about what to share, and with whom, based on information that is false. They believe the relationship is one thing, the reality is another, and every decision made inside that gap between belief and reality carries a cost, because it is based on a foundation that does not actually exist. This is not a philosophical concern. It is a practical one. A business partner who expresses enthusiasm directly but quietly undermines confidence in a shared venture to investors, clients, or colleagues, creates real material damage. A friend who listens to vulnerabilities, shared in confidence, and then uses those vulnerabilities as social currency with others, as material for stories, as evidence of weakness, as entertainment, has not just committed an emotional offense. They have made the world less safe for the person who trusted them. A family member who performs loyalty in person and then systematically erodes reputation behind closed doors, has created an environment where the person being discussed is operating with a distorted map of their own social reality. They are navigating by information that has been deliberately falsified, and this is what makes the behavior uniquely destructive. It is not just that it hurts, it is that it corrupts the information available to make good decisions. It creates a situation where the more a person trusts, the more exposed they become, where openness, which is supposed to deepen connection, actually increases vulnerability, where the relationship that feels most safe is in reality the one with the highest risk. Here's the first thing to understand about the people who engage in this behavior consistently. They almost never think of themselves as betrayers. They have a full internal narrative that justifies every instance of it. The most common justification is what might be called the safety valve, rationalization. The belief that expressing different things to different people is simply a form of emotional management. I didn't want to say it to their face because I didn't want to hurt them. I was just venting to someone I trust. I say things differently depending on the context. That's just how communication works. These rationalizations are sophisticated enough that they can be genuinely convincing, both to others and to the person offering them, but they do not hold up to honest examination, because the test of whether behavior is harmless, emotional management, or something more damaging is not how it feels to the person doing it. It is what it produces for the person on the receiving end. And what it produces, consistently and reliably, is a relationship built on a false premise. A relationship in which the person being betrayed is investing in something that does not exist as they understand it. They are giving trust to a person who is not fully trustworthy. They are giving access to someone who is using that access in ways they would never consent to if they knew. They are giving energy, loyalty, and emotional investment to a version of the relationship that exists only in the conversation happening directly in front of them, and nowhere else. Now here is where it becomes important to be precise, because not all dual presentation is betrayal. Human beings naturally present themselves differently in different contexts. A person is not identical in a job interview and at a family dinner. They do not speak with the same openness to a new acquaintance as to a decades-long friend. This kind of contextual adaptation is not only normal, it is healthy. It reflects emotional intelligence, not duplicity. The distinction that matters, the line between normal contextual adjustment and genuine betrayal, is this: does the person speak about someone differently in their absence than they present themselves to that person directly? Does the warmth in person map onto warmth in private? Does the expressed loyalty, expressed support, expressed friendship, does it exist when the person is not in the room? Because the room is where everyone performs. The performance in front of someone, to their face, in their presence, that is the easy part. Anyone can be warm and supportive and enthusiastic when the person they are discussing is standing right there. The real character is what happens when that person leaves. What is said then, to whom, with what tone, reveals the actual relationship in a way that the face-to-face interaction never fully can. There is a principle that experienced leaders, psychologists, and people who have built long-lasting relationships of genuine trust consistently return to. The most reliable indicator of how someone will treat a person is how they treat others in that person's absence. Not how they treat people who can see them, not how they behave when there is something to gain from the performance of loyalty, but how they speak about people who are not present to hear it, what tone they use, whether they extend the same basic dignity and respect to a person's name and reputation when that person is not in the room as they do when they are standing directly in front of them. This principle sounds simple. In practice, it is one of the hardest things to observe, because access to it requires being in the right place at the right time, being in the room when someone else has left. And most people are not present for those moments. They hear about them later, if at all, through channels that are themselves not always reliable. This is precisely what gives the behavior its staying power. It is structurally difficult to observe directly. It operates in the spaces between conversations, in the rooms where only some people are present, in the private communications that are never intended to be seen. And this structural invisibility is part of what makes it so old and so persistent as a form of social betrayal. Here is a concrete example that illustrates the mechanics of this pattern in a context that will be immediately familiar. A man in his mid-40s had a colleague he considered a close friend and a trusted professional ally. For years they shared information openly, supported each other's work publicly, and maintained what appeared to be a relationship of genuine mutual respect. What this man did not know was that this colleague had been speaking about him very differently in private settings, raising questions about his judgment to shared professional contacts, offering interpretations of his decisions that cast him in a consistently unflattering light, and doing so with just enough plausible deniability that nothing could be traced back clearly. The colleague never said anything overtly damaging. He never lied outright. He simply shaped perception, quietly and consistently, in a direction that served his own interests. By the time this man began to notice that certain professional opportunities seemed to be closing, that certain relationships seemed cooler than they should have been, that certain doors that should have been open were not, the damage had been done so gradually and through so many intermediary steps that identifying the source was nearly impossible. This example captures something essential about why this behavior is particularly insidious in professional and social contexts. It rarely leaves fingerprints. It operates through implication, through tone, through the selective sharing of information, through the framing of facts in ways that produce conclusions without ever stating them directly. The person engaging in it can almost always point to the literal content of what they said and demonstrate that it was not technically false, but the impact of the behavior, the impression it created, the perception it shaped, the damage it did was entirely real. And it accumulated over time in a way that no single instance viewed in isolation would have revealed. Psychologists who study relational betrayal and what they call covert relational aggression have documented this pattern extensively. Unlike overt aggression, which is visible, confrontable, and leaves clear evidence, covert relational aggression operates through the social environment rather than through direct confrontation. It damages reputation rather than attacking physically. It excludes rather than confronts. It shapes narrative rather than telling obvious lies. And its effects on the target, the person whose reputation and relationships are being quietly managed by someone who presents themselves as an ally, are well documented in the research, literature, elevated anxiety, deteriorating social confidence, a growing but diffuse sense that something is wrong that cannot be pinpointed, and a gradual erosion of the trust and social capital that the person had built in their environment. What makes this form of betrayal particularly painful when it is finally recognized is the retrospective realization it produces. When a person finally understands that someone has been operating this way, that the warmth presented directly was a front for a very different orientation expressed in private, they are not just dealing with the current discovery, they are retroactively reevaluating every interaction they have had with that person, every conversation they opened up in, every vulnerability they shared, every piece of information they offered, every time they trusted and felt good about trusting. All of it is suddenly seen through a new lens. And that retroactive reevaluation is its own particular kind of pain, because it does not just change the future, it changes the meaning of the past. This is the moment where many people make one of two mistakes. The first mistake is to absorb the betrayal as evidence of their own poor judgment, to conclude that they were naive, that they should have known better, that their willingness to trust was itself the error. The second mistake is to swing to the opposite extreme, to conclude that people cannot be trusted, that openness is dangerous, that the correct response is to close down and share nothing with anyone going forward. Both of these responses are understandable, neither of them is accurate or useful. The accurate response begins with understanding what this behavior actually reflects about the person who engages in it, not about the person who is on the receiving end of it. Someone who presents one face directly and operates differently in private is not doing so because of anything specific about the person they are betraying. They are doing so because of something specific about themselves, about their relationship with honesty, with integrity, with the gap between who they present themselves as and who they actually are. This behavior is a character pattern, not a situational response. It does not appear only in relation to one person. It appears across relationships, across contexts, across time. And once it is recognized, looking backward reveals that there were almost always earlier signs, smaller instances of the same pattern that were visible but not yet named. This leads to the practical dimension of this video, because understanding the behavior is only valuable if it produces a change in how relationships are evaluated and managed going forward. So what are the earlier signs? What are the indicators that appear before the full pattern becomes undeniable? The first indicator is how the person speaks about other people who are not present. This is the most reliable early signal available, and it is accessible from very early in any relationship. When someone is quick to share unflattering information about mutual acquaintances, quick to offer negative interpretations of absent people's behavior, comfortable characterizing others' intentions and motives in ways that are consistently critical, this is not just social chatter. It is a demonstration of how that person relates to absent people in general, and that demonstration is directly relevant to how they will relate to any person when that person is absent. The standard does not change depending on who is being discussed, but if someone speaks freely about others behind their backs, they speak freely about everyone behind their backs, including the person sitting across from them. The second indicator is inconsistency between what a person says in private and what they are willing to say publicly. When someone expresses strong support or enthusiasm in a private conversation, but is consistently vague, non-committal, or absent when that support would need to be expressed publicly. When the warmth disappears the moment it would cost something, this is an early version of the same pattern. The performance of loyalty is present, the actual substance of loyalty is not, and that gap, even when it appears in relatively low-stakes moments, is information about what the higher-stakes moments will look like. The third indicator is what happens when a person makes a mistake or experiences a failure in the presence of someone they suspect may operate this way. Not a dramatic failure, a small one. A misjudgment, a minor professional stumble, a moment of visible insecurity or confusion. How does this person respond? With the same warmth and support expressed in better moments? Or is there something slightly different? A shift in tone, a flash of something that looks almost like satisfaction, a comment that is technically supportive, but lands slightly wrong. Small failures are excellent diagnostic moments because they remove the pressure of the performance. When things are going well, maintaining the appearance of support is easy. When things go poorly, the internal orientation tends to show. Now here's the deeper layer, the one that changes the understanding of this behavior from something interpersonal to something structural. The people who consistently operate with this kind of dual presentation, warmth in person, something different in private, are almost always doing so because they have never developed the capacity or the courage for direct, honest engagement with people about whom they have complicated or negative feelings. What they say behind someone's back is often what they are actually thinking or feeling, but for a variety of reasons, conflict avoidance, social calculation, a desire to maintain access while managing the relationship on their own terms, they cannot or will not say it directly. This means that the betrayal is inseparable from a kind of emotional cowardice, not cowardice in the ordinary sense. Many of these people are quite capable of confrontation in other contexts, but a specific cowardice around honesty within relationships that they want to maintain for reasons that have more to do with convenience, utility, or social position than with genuine care. They want the benefits of the relationship, the access, the information, the social proximity, the professional connection, without the vulnerability that genuine honesty requires, and so they manage the relationship from two directions simultaneously. Directly, through the performance of warmth and loyalty, and privately, through the expression of their actual assessments and feelings, to an audience that will not create consequences for them. This is why the behavior is so old. It predates modern social dynamics by millennia. It appears in every culture, every historical period, every kind of social organization that has ever existed, because it solves a very old human problem: how to maintain access to something valuable while managing one's actual feelings about it in a way that doesn't create direct conflict. It is the social strategy of someone who has decided that their own comfort and positioning is more important than the basic dignity of honest engagement, and that decision, regardless of how it is rationalized, is a betrayal of the fundamental basis of trust. What does it look like to protect oneself from this pattern without becoming closed, suspicious, or unable to form genuine connections? Because this is the real challenge. The answer is not to stop trusting people. The answer is to trust more slowly, more observationally, and more deliberately, with attention paid not just to what someone says to a person directly, but to the full picture of how they operate in the world, how they speak about others, whether there is consistency between their private and public expressions, whether their behavior when something goes wrong matches their behavior when everything is fine, whether the loyalty they express costs them anything, or whether it only ever appears in moments when it is free. Trust, properly understood, is not a feeling. It is a conclusion based on evidence accumulated over time. The feeling of trust can be produced very quickly, very easily, and very deliberately by someone who knows how to create it. But the evidence that justifies that feeling accumulates slowly, through observation of behavior across many contexts, many situations, and many moments, including the moments when the person being trusted does not know they are being observed. Not surveillance, just attention. The natural attention of someone who understands that character is expressed most honestly in the moments when no performance is required. The oldest betrayal sign nobody talks about is not dramatic. It does not arrive with obvious signals or clear warnings. It looks like a friend, sounds like a supporter, and feels like loyalty, right up until the moment the curtain shifts and the other conversation becomes visible. At that point, the question is not whether to be hurt. The answer to that question is already yes. The question is whether to be informed, whether to take what has been learned and use it clearly, without drama, without excessive self-recrimination, and without the kind of bitterness that would contaminate every future relationship with the shadow of this one. Because the goal, the real, practical, long-term goal, is not to become someone who never trusts. It is to become someone who trusts well, who has developed a reliable internal calibration between the feeling of trust and the evidence that justifies it, who can distinguish between genuine consistency and sophisticated performance, who pays attention to the conversation happening in the room when they are not in it, not by trying to monitor others, but by watching closely enough in the conversations they are present for to know what kind of person is sitting across from them. That calibration is built through experience, sometimes painful experience, sometimes through exactly the kind of retrospective recognition described in this video, the moment of understanding that a relationship was not what it seemed, that the presentation was one thing and the reality was another, that the trust given was not matched by the reliability it was given to. Those moments are costly, but they are also educational, in a way that nothing else quite matches. They produce a specific kind of clarity that, once it exists, does not go away. A clarity that makes the next version of this behavior easier to see earlier, easier to name faster, and easier to respond to with the combination of firmness and equanimity that protects both the self and the possibility of genuine connection. Because genuine connection, the kind that is consistent, whether or not the other person is in the room, that is honest both face to face and in private, that costs something, because it requires real courage and real integrity to maintain, that kind of connection is absolutely real. It exists. It is worth building toward and worth protecting when found. And the clearest path to finding it and keeping it is the one that begins with an honest, clear-eyed understanding of its opposite, of what it looks like when the face in front changes into something different the moment the door closes, of what it costs and how it operates, and why it is the oldest betrayal sign in human social life, and why, finally, it deserves to be talked about with the full seriousness it has always been due.